Hey guys, what's up? Rar here, and today this is going to be the good, the bad, and the ugly with the recent 4.6 drop. So I'm just going to skim over some things that I feel aren't as important, like spectator HUD, contract visibility, balancing. Some of these maps have been balanced. For instance, Ducal Pass spawns have changed. A lot of just spawn updates to slightly balance the game. That makes sense. Balancing maps is a really important part into Wargaming's plan. So with that, let's just hop into some of the good, I think. The A20, for instance, I'm going to try to stick away from the low tiers. I feel like bouncing low tiers is going to come later from Wargaming, since I kind of generally follow PC's patches, so mid-tier rebalance on PCs in a couple months, so console in a year or two. So a lot of low tier stuff will be subject to change in the future. But if you look at like the A43, for instance, its packages have been changed so that you get the 57 first, the 76 later, which kind of makes sense. 57 is a better gun anyways, in my opinion. The A44 got better camo, and however got worse fire penalty. The gun was already pretty bad, to be honest. The turret models are updated, all the models for the guns are updated. The first package is updated from 76 to 57. I can't complain that much about it. It's just package changes and just the little bit of a fire penalty. T43 got a nice buff, in my opinion. They got a reload buff. Chassis rotation speed increased to 40, which is, it's only 2 degrees more, but it is help. The T44, it finally got its PC penetration buff to 190 247, which is really nice. People have been wanting this buff for a long time, and the tank is now in HD. And if I remember correctly, the HD model does have a different turret armor layout, and it is better than before. The T50 chassis rotation speed was nerfed by 2 degrees, which isn't much, as was the rotation speed of the turret. The T54 also got its much needed buff for the stock 100 LB1. The LB1, I'm assuming, got buffed on everything, so that it could compensate in tier 10 games. 180 and 235 is just not enough. 190, 247 is. However, the turret armor got buffed 200, 160 to 240, 180, which is really nice. I think that's really, the T54 though was, in my opinion, a well-performing tank, and they buffed it, so I think it's gonna overperform now. So with that, I'm just gonna skip to some of the, like the more interesting stuff. So the T100 got nerfed in reload. I think that was unjustified. I think the T100 is a tank that most good players play as of now. I know when I play the game, when I see a T100 player, it's usually a player I recognize, which is a player who's competent. And by competent, I don't mean purple or super unicum, but I mean light blue 1.8 up. So someone who averages 2,000 damage in their tier 10 lights, 2,300 in their tier 10 heavies meds. That type of player. They're a decent player. They're a competent player in my opinion. So I think that data is skewed as of now. The T100 is a good scout tank, and I think that nerfing the reload time on top of already having a bad gun mechanic is just bad for the game. So on top of that, the RDs got some reload. Well, this one got a reload buff by 1.2 seconds, which isn't that big. And some of the reload times on the low tier RDs got buffed. The price of the SU-100Y shells is better now. The SUs just got their PC changes so that their guns are now the same what they should be. Their engines, for instance, the ISU now has the different 152 high penetration gun. I don't think it changes the penetration values. I'm pretty sure it just changes the model. 704 is increased by quite a bit of silver. I don't understand why, but it is. So let's skip on to the other Russian hover meds. The 430 got worse camo and a better fire penalty, which in my opinion makes sense. It's a brawling tank, not a sniping tank. So I think that's an accurate representation. The 432 got nerf view range. I disagree with that. I think all tier 9 mediums should have 390, 400, except for the pad, which has 410, which makes sense. I don't agree with that. The reload time got nerfed as well. I disagree with that as well. The tank is supposed to have high DPM at cost of its fully rotatable turret as well as gun handling. The 268 also is cheaper by quite a bit, which is really nice in my opinion. The 301,000 was such a grind before, and that's different. So let's move on to the RD trajectory. Now this is just the side view or the front view to see how the trajectory of the shell comes in. which is really useful. It's been on PC for quite some time, and Wargaming finally listened to what we wanted, and they added it. Well, not what I wanted, but what the community wanted. So essentially it looks like this. It's better to see if your shell will be able to arc over a rock or something. It's really useful for RD players. I don't play RD, but for RD players it is rather nice. So the Swedish tanks, we're just going to switch to the Kranvagn. The whole health increased, so the total HP of the tank went up by 100, and the turret rotation increased. In my opinion, this wasn't what was wrong with the tank. The tank was fine the way it was, except for the crappy penetration shells on its AP rounds and its premium rounds, as well as its gun handling is pretty poor. The reload time increased for the Kranvagn, the Emil 1's 10.5 by 3 seconds for both guns. Siege mode, I think this is really useful, although the reload time on this Driv could have been stayed the same. I think that because double push mechanics on console don't really work very well, I think this Driv is fine. I don't think they needed rotation nerfs or DPM nerfs. They could have just done with the camo nerf. I think it would have been fine, in my opinion. I don't think they were that overpowered. Usually, it's just it's too map dependent of a tank. So on the good maps you can do really well, and on bad maps you can do really poor. For instance, Himmelsdorf and Stritzfawn is not easy to play. So let's move on to the platoon changes. Now you can only play the same tier as the platoon leader, which is is how it should be. Platoons are now limited to only 3 RD per platoon, which is really good for game balance. This right here is a big step in the right direction, I think. 3 SPGs per platoon is really useful. So I know we've only covered like the good stuff so far for the most part, but don't worry, we'll get to the bad towards the middle end of the video. War stories, I don't particularly worry about that personally, but 3 SPGs in the right platoon, right direction. I think it should be limited to two per platoon. 3 per platoon is still toxic. You can have a 3-man platoon of, for instance, Conquer Gun, CGCs that only focus good players. It happens. I think that's kind of broken. I think that's kind of broken. So this is just some joining differences of recent players you were in at the top, which is really useful, I think, if you play with a lot of people that are on your friends list. Other than that, I really don't see how it affects balance that much. For Germany, they essentially made the mouse useless. So they buffed the mouse, and then nerfed the mouse again to what it had, except for armor, years ago. I don't think it makes any sense. The Jagdtiger's top speed increased to 38. I get why the tank is slow with the medium meta and the TD meta, but the mouse, the mouse should have kept its stats. The reason being, as of now, TDs can any 850 alpha TD can theoretically 3-shot a mouse, so it needs to have better gun stats. Nerfing the reload time, the accuracy, and the aim time is pretty bad in my opinion. The mouse is already an underused heavy tank in my opinion. It's just going to be used even less now. This top speed in the E75 is ridiculous. The E100 does not go 40. The E75 should not go 40 either, especially considering tier for tier the E75 is better than the E100. The E50 got nerfed. Why, I'm not sure. The reload time was nerfed by 1.4 seconds, and its aim time was increased to 3, which makes no sense at all. The whole point of the E50 line was to have accurate guns and armor, which the E50 didn't even really have that great of armor in the first place. The turret was better, it's just the upper plate was good. Tier for tier, it's better than the E50M, and the reason it's better than the E50M is because the E50M is trash in comparison. So I don't think that the aim time or reload should have been nerfed. It should have just been the upper plate, and I think it would have been fine, since tier for tier it's better than the E50M. So the Indian Panzer's camos increased, whatever, yada yada, and did I miss it? I must have missed it. Unless they changed it actually, which is possible since this morning. This morning the nerfs for the it's continued. That makes sense. Let's try to find it, boys. So Waffle, this tank is ridiculous. This should not be the way it is in the game. Just an HD Waffle is stupid. The Waffle can literally clip any tank in the game out in less than 10 seconds with 3360 clip potential. It should be nerfed. Okay, Wargaming, there's a difference between overpowered and broken. Overpowered is something that can be fixed. Broken is something that cannot. Something that's broken, for instance, is the Waffle. The reason why, if you nerf the gun too much, the tank is terrible because it has a large turret, it can't compensate. If you buff the turret and you change the gun, the tank is a completely different factor than what it was, and you can't do that. So you're kind of stuck in a rock and a hard place. You have to reduce to 4 shells and keep the gun handling the same, which would be a lot more balanced if you nerf it. So you buff its reload time. I think that'd be a good step in the right direction since you're not going to remove the tanks. This is completely moronic, in my opinion. The E50M is already considered one of the worst tier 10 mediums in the first place. I think just nerf its reload time. I get by it's only 0.2, but it adds up. You know, I don't think that makes sense at all. So moving on. Japan, I'm just going to skip right to it. If these are the HE shells that I'm thinking of, this is the worst thing they can do for game balance. These HE shells are ridiculous. You know, if you're holding down an IS-7, if I think this is what they are, you will essentially get hit for 700 a shot. And the rumor I was told this morning was that they were the HE shells from PC, which is ridiculous. Now on to probably one of the most moronic things here, the STB nerf. This was completely illogical. It made no sense, and whatever wargaming you were thinking, it doesn't make sense. First of all, the STB-1 is already one of the worst tier 10 mediums as well as the E50M. The only thing going for the STB-1 was its DPM. The STB-1, if you don't know, sacrificed gun handling, accuracy, aim time, dispersion, all that for DPM, for 10.5 medium. So they're going to nerf the reload by a whole second. Okay? A whole second. That's a big amount of time. You know, that's the difference between getting shot once or twice for a lot of tier 10 mediums. So I think that that's a completely idiotic move based on wargaming's part. I do not agree with it in any way, shape, or form. You know, they take a medium that only really decent players play. The same thing with the TVP, we'll get to that in a minute. You know, it just doesn't make any sense. And just the cannons changed, the top speeds of the OI experimental reduced, which makes sense. It's a super heavy. The Aeolus, or the Nameless rather, got increased to frontal plate armor. I don't think that's really that important. I should have just got gun depression. So on to France, we're going to skip to it. Okay, first off the bat, chat AP, the 10.5 got a nerfed reload, so it reloads in 44 seconds. I know I can't really complain that much about it, but I do think it's kind of moronic. So we're actually going to hold that thought, alright? So 44 seconds in the bat chat, 10.5, remember that, alright boys? Remember that. Alright, so we're going to grab this trusty calculator right here. If my phone wasn't dead, which it is. So it doesn't help. Alright, we'll get to that in a minute. So that doesn't make any sense. So onto the 50B. The 50B already is an underperforming tank compared to PC. I know that very few people play the 50B, and the ones that do are good. I know, for instance, when I played it, I super skewed the data. I know myself, you know, once I got the hang of the tank, I 3-marked it, and it was probably averaging 4,500 damage per game at least in it. So I think, you know, a lot of good players average play well in this tank, and the reason is they spam nothing but APCR rounds. That's the truth. And when you think about it, the 50B, it doesn't have the aim time from PC, and the reason it doesn't is because when you look at the 50B, look at the players that play them, and you will see that most of them are blue plus, winning-wise. So that's why the 50B got a nerf. It's granted, it's only 2 seconds, but I don't think it's justified in any way, shape, or form. So the Foch B, I think that was brilliant what they did. What they did with the Foch B, Foch 155, was they gave it the Foch B fixes. These are just some general bug fixes, nation flags for Merc tanks, for instance, celebration screen when you're attempting to purchase premium, you know, just minor things, engine sounds, splash effects. I don't think those are that important for terms of balance. So on to the UK, we're gonna skip down, boys. The Conqueror got its gun from PC. The 17-pounder has 18 degrees of gun depression. It got buff penetration, so the 17-pounder now is 200, so it doesn't have as bad of a stock grind. 32-pounder is actually really nice. It's got really nice DPM. The Conqueror got its armor changes. Its frontal armor increased to 152. Its side hull to 76, which is a really nice improvement. It got its gun changes to PC, which is nice. The Conqueror needed it, in my opinion. Well, it didn't really need it, but it's a nice change to the meta. The Centurion 7-1 got increased turret and frontal armor. You know, I think that's fine. The turret was alright. 215B is now HD. You know, it is what it is. The 215B is underperforming. Right here, this is ridiculous. The FE4005 got a huge buff from 5 degrees of gun depression to 10, and its turret now goes 90 degrees each side, which is ridiculous. The tank is it's already broken, and it just got a buff, which makes no sense to me. The FE4202 finally got a nice needed buff, so those of you that were thinking about buying it, you know, it's a mobile tank now, so which is nice. They finally nerfed this already. It's only by 1 second, but it's better than nothing. So here we go. I'm going to complain right away. This whole line is useless. Do not grind the TVP line. 31 seconds for 1280 clip potential. So you now get less than 2 clips out per minute. Yeah, actually, you only get 1 clip out per minute. So it's 1280 DPM. Think about it. You start the game, you reload. It takes 31 seconds to reload. You clip out 1280, and you're reloading for the next minute. For the next 30 seconds. You cross in the next minute. So you only get 1 clip per minute. If you think about it. So this tank makes no sense. It takes 31 seconds, and then like 5 seconds to dump its clip. So the TVP was meant to counter the bat chat and counter people who make mistakes. That's the point of the TVP. Now, if you look at the bat chat with its 44-second reload, the bat chat has 258 base penetration with 330 heat penetration on its rounds. The TVP has 248 and 310 on its premium penetration, which makes 0 sense logically. So the bat chat has better mobility, better camouflage, better clip potential, and essentially the same DPM. It has better DPM because they both only get 1 clip out per minute if they start unloaded. If they start loaded, then it's a little bit different. Regardless, there's no reason to play TVP now. Its DPM is horrible. The intra-clip buff, it didn't make sense before. The nerf before didn't make sense. The TVP, I actually did this the last time. I did a little bit of a study. I looked up the stats of every single TVP player I saw for about 15 games at tier 10. And out of every 10 TVP players, 8 of them are blue. Or 7 or 8 of them are blue, which skews the data quite a bit when you have competent players, majority playing a tank. Especially when those blue players are still a part of the 1%, the top 1%. Unicum, as you know, is 0.1, Super Unicum is 0.01. So the fact that the 1 percentile are playing the tank, or the 99 percentile, I suppose, the 1%, that skews the data, and the tank should not have been nerfed. There's no reason to play TVP now. There is none. If someone peeks around a corner, you shoot your clip 1280, and then you're done. That's it. You wait 31 seconds and do it again. The whole point of this line was to get quick clips and have good DPM for an autoloader, but low clip potential, which made up for it, and balance the line out. This whole line is a waste of grinding. I would stop now. Do not grind up it until they revert this nerf. The 28 seconds doesn't even make sense. It should be like 25. In terms of balance, it was originally 22, 21, and now it's 31. It went to 28, and now it's 31, which is absolutely ridiculous. So let's just move on. HP values in tanks is really nice. Essentially what that means is when a tank is spawned, it's optional. So you can have it say, instead of just the bar and like a percent, it will say Super Conquer 500 out of 2400, which is really useful for saying, okay, I have 390 alpha, he's at 390 HP, it's a 50-50 dice roll, which is really nice. So on to China, we're going to skip right to it, boys, right to where the badness is, right here. First of all, the 1321 was already one of the worst tier 10 lights in the game, with horrible DPM, and they just nerfed its reload time by quite a bit. Second, the 113, we've been asking for buffs for the 113 since 2015. 2016, right around there. We've been asking for buffs to this tank for years, a very long time. Okay, we finally got some buff to it, very minuscule, and they go and nerf it. Now the 5A is being brought in from its PC port, which means that it will be exactly like it is on PC. So the 113 on PC got buffed so that it was used as well as the 5A. Now the 5A is better than the 113 in accuracy, and it has better DPM now. It has better hull armor front on. If you angle, it's worse. And its turret, it's a lot lower profile. So now there is literally zero reason to take a 113. That's completely illogical. Again, with the 113, mostly only good players are going to play it in the first place. So now let's move on. Now we're just in the USA. We finally got the M4A5 patent, which is nice turret buff. The T54A1 got better shot distance movement rotation. The 90mm got pen increase, but it's 173 to 181. It's not that big of a deal. And the T32 finally got buffed. Its accuracy in the 105 is now 0.37. Its reload time is now 10 seconds, which is super handy. All right, boys, that's like super huge. That's huge. All right, it's the same thing. 0.37, 10-second reload. That's probably one of the most important things yet. Now, if you look at the T95, it got its whole rotation speed decreased, which is nice. I think the tank turned ridiculously. It was ridiculous. The 1.105 on the Patton, the tier 9 got decreased, which is nice. And then the arties, as always, aren't really touched. So with that, boys, let's recap. All right, let's recap here. The TVP, the 113, the E50M, those tanks got completely unnecessary buffs. The 1321, it's completely illogical to think that they needed. That they got nerfs. It's completely illogical to think they got nerfs. It makes no sense at all. I don't know what Wargaming was thinking, but it makes no sense. It's completely illogical, and the way they balance the tanks is foolish at best. I mean that in a sincere manner and not to troll. These tanks, for instance, now let's recap from the whole thing and what they should have done. The 113 should have gotten buffed to compensate for the 5A. The E50M should have gotten a slight buff to either its turret armor or its DPM. The STB should have either been buffed or left alone. It had no place to get a nerf. Alright, the 1321 I think was a little weak as it was. Very few people played it, and the ones that did are decent. Alright, so I don't think it deserved to get a nerf. The 1321 should have been left alone or given a minor buff. Alright, the TVP, I sold it before when they nerfed it, and they nerfed its interclip from 1.5 to 1.7. Alright, that was already a big deal, like a huge deal for me. And now they go and nerf its reload even more than it was before, which actually makes little to no sense. Alright, boys. It's I'm going to say the word stupid, and that's because it is. Alright. So now let's just compare the TVP and the bat chat. So the bat chat, there's 390 alpha and 5 shots. That's 1950 clip potential. The TVP has 1280. Okay. You expose yourself to a bat chat and it clips you, you're dead. You get yelled by a bat chat and RU medium, you are dead. A TVP peeks the corner, he does 1280 short in a short amount of time, and he backs up. The reason the TVP performs so well, like I said, is because mostly good players are playing it. That skews the data results. You should not be balancing the game based upon the statistical lows. Okay, you should be balancing based on what skilled players say. Most games balance based upon the 1%. For instance, player on Battlegrounds, Fortnite, they do listen to Shroud, Ninja, and those players to balance. World of Tanks, although the RU server, they listen to the better players on the RU server for balancing. Alright, and when Wargaming balances tanks on PC, essentially what they do is, for instance, they release the 268v4, which is a completely broken monstrosity. But before they nerfed it, they waited 6 months to a year to see how, because at first, when people free XP tanks, only good players are going to have them at first, for the most part. It's going to skew the data. But when you have a tank that is not considered good in most situations, but a good player plays them, a good player will make use of a bad tank in any situation. Doesn't mean the tank is good or performing, it just means the player is good. A 10,000 PR player is going to perform quite well in any situation they're put in. The reason that they have high PR, high win rate, high win rate, it makes sense. So, TDs should have gotten nerfed. Like I said, you should not be balancing based upon the minorities of bad players, okay? Just because someone who doesn't understand how the game plays that drops the tank values does not mean that it's a balanced tank, okay? Theoretically, a T110E3, T110E4 could 3-shot a mouse. That makes no sense. When you're playing low tiers, it takes 4, 5, 6 shots to kill a tank of a heavy tank with your TDs. Not 2-shotting a Russian medium, okay? It doesn't make any sense. Your tier 7 tank destroyers, think about them. You have the SU-152 without the derp gun, right? So you have the Tiger, which has 1500 HP. You get 390 shot, let's round to 400, 400 to 1500. You know, it takes 4 shots to drop it to 1 shot, so it takes 5 shots to kill, right? That changes to tier 10. You get an IS-4, or the pre-buff IS-7 with 2100. You can get theoretically 2-shot by a tier 10 Russian by a tier 10 heavy tank, not a Jaeger, not a Death Star. That's absurd. It should not happen. Now let's move on to the Hesh Pen. 275 Hesh Pen is enough to pen the upper and lower plate of a 215B. It is enough to cheek punch a mouse and cheek punch an E100. That's ridiculous. HE should not be that high. If you look at some of the tank destroyers, they have 276 penetration, right? At tier 9 and 10, for instance, the Gorilla and the Waffen. Now, or 286. It's been a while since I've looked at the tanks. Regardless, 275 Hesh Pen is right around there, and it's HE. High explosive. That makes no sense, especially when you have 1800 alpha damage. You can roll for 2200, give or take a few, It just makes no sense at all. It just makes no sense at all. Sorry for the pause, I was interrupted. It just makes no sense at all. Wargaming, this is a big oof. This is probably one of your worst balancing updates to date. And I mean that sincerely. This is the worst balance in years. I have never been this outraged by any balance update in a long time, okay? The fact that you've left tanks alone that needed nerfs, the Waffle, the Death Star, the Trash Barn, all the 850 alpha TDs, and the fact that you have TDs in the game that are 750 alpha in the first place is, sorry to say it, but stupid. Okay? It makes no sense, Wargaming. You need to get your act together or this game is going to die. There are already a lot of players in the statistical minority of good players that are going to quit. And what that leaves you is with a bunch of players who don't understand your game. And what that means is what draws people into the game is people who are watching people who play well. When you go on Twitch and you watch a stream, you want people who are good at the game and entertaining. You don't want to watch people who are horrible. And that's what's happening, okay? It's the people who are going to be left are people who are bad, who don't understand and are going to be a bad representation of your game. Most successful games have a good competitive scene, or a game that has good players that can broadcast on Twitch that people can watch and be like, oh wow, this guy's a good player. Look at him playing this game. Wow, I want to be like him. Wow, this is the thought process of a good player. Wow, this is a really in-depth game. It just doesn't make any sense the way you take about your game right now, and you are shooting it in the foot repeatedly, and you've blown the kneecaps off. So, that being said, I hope Wargaming and the people watching this learn from their mistakes, and I hope you fix this really quick, because if not, you're going to really regret it. So thank you guys for watching, and that's rah-rah.